This episode is brought to you by Move, Meditate, Sleep, an all-in-one platform to help you move more freely, meditate more easily, and sleep more soundly, with new content added every week. If you'd like to try a free 7-day trial, click the link in the pinned comment. I'm not big time yet, I don't have an assistant.
That's the next thing.
David, how's it going?
Very good.
We've started.
Okay. I saw the guy cutting grass next door, so maybe he can come in and do the clap next door.
My assistant, yeah, exactly. David, for people that don't know, aren't aware of your Instagram, of the work you do, what do you do?
Good question. That's the last thing Kira, my partner, who came up with me. She actually, we were sitting there, we were up a little bit early, and she said, "What's your 30-second kind of elevator pitch?" And I said, I'll figure that out when I'm asked. That's always the hardest part on a podcast. Basically, I help people with their movement more than anything else. So I'm a rehab practitioner, I suppose. Help people that are in pain, performance issues, not moving as well or feeling as good as they would like to. So that kind of works in all different walks of life, and everyone from Olympic athletes, professional athletes from all over the world, and then just kind of your granny who's in a little bit of pain and would like to be able to walk up the stairs and feel a bit better. And then there's kind of our business is moving a little bit more towards, I don't want it to be like justice, but it's moving more towards education of like around anatomy and biomechanics, and helping a lot of other physios and coaches around the world to help people just as we're helping people. Not like this is the way to do it, but here's our opinion on things, and here's how you can use some of these things to maybe incorporate into your current practices and kind of understand the key principles behind good movement, and how people can adapt and get stronger and feel better. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell, I guess, what I do, but a lot of different things.
From looking at your work, it seems like you focus more on the lower body than the upper body. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it probably is a little bit accurate. Yeah, it probably is. It on Instagram, certainly, it kind of happened that way. Actually, no, I'll go back. Basically, the reason I'm doing this job at the moment is because I got a lot of injuries myself playing a lot of sport, but mostly lower body injuries. So a lot of hip issues, knee issues, Achilles tendon issues. And that's kind of what I was just talking about when I was kind of working on my own body and stuff like that. So, and then we released a lower body program that kind of exploded and got massive. So that's what you'll see people talking about online more so. But next thing is going to be the upper body program that's going to be coming soon. So you might start to see us promoting and talking a little bit more about that. But we do have a massive focus on like the center of the body, breathing, the rib cage, the pelvis and stuff like that. So that's usually our start. And then I just haven't promoted the upper body stuff as much yet, but that will come. Yeah,
I guess a lot of sports involve running. Therefore, the lower body, it makes sense to address that because that's the foundation of the activity. You said before we hit record that you've had people come to you who are yoga teachers, I'm sure students, to learn about anatomy. But have you had practitioners come to you? And if so, what have you seen as common yoga injuries?
Yeah, a lot of yoga teachers. One thing you'll see with yogis is that their feet just don't move very well at all, and that's in general. Now we always need to say in general, but they might have like quote unquote strong feet in terms of yes, they can stand on one leg for a little while, but strength is not defined by I'm just in one position and I can hold it. Strength is, at least for me, it's more of a I can explore my ranges of motion in different planes of motion and display some kind of control or stability or whatever word you want to put on it in kind of all of those positions. So that's why I wouldn't consider, a powerlifter looks strong in the gym, but as soon as you actually put them into a task that is not up and down in a straight line, then they will probably struggle. So it obviously is task dependent, but yogis, you will not tend to see the knee travel forward past the ankle a lot of the time. So a lot of the poses like and I'm definitely not an expert on yoga, so that should be straight out there. But the shin will be kind of vertical almost a lot of the time, and that is a big issue because every time we walk the shins should actually travel forward. So we should be getting negative and positive shin angles. And when the shin starts to travel forward with the heel on the ground and a tripod on the floor, then that should lead to our knee should naturally start to move more towards the big toe as the knee starts to travel forward. And that would be what should happen in the gait cycle. But in yoga, they typically don't really train that or allow that to happen. They actually kind of block that from happening a lot of the time. And they tend then typically to lose a lot of range of motion around the calcaneus, so the heel bone. It typically can't evert very well, which means it can't kind of tip into the inside. The arches of the foot can't get a chance to lengthen. So the midfoot, if you see, this is a good example. Yoga love training and moving their joints. Okay, so the yoga teachers and people who go to yoga understand the benefit of movement and getting your joints to move, and they understand how kind of crappy you can feel if you just don't move very much. So they understand importance of movement for mental health, for keeping your joints healthy, for staying strong, for blood flow, for all of these things. But then when they talk about the feet, there's a very defined, here's the way your foot should be, which doesn't really make sense considering there's 33 joints in the foot, and that's you've 2 feet, so that's 66 joints. So if you don't allow your knee to actually move more towards the big toe, move more towards the little toe, explore these transverse planes, the shin moves in, the shin moves out, the shin moves back, then you're probably just moving one joint, which is your ankle joint, forward and back. You're not letting your midfoot load very much at all. And if I was to say to you, you're going to move one joint in your spine, but you're going to keep all the other joints still, then you'll probably end up with a wrecked spine. So it makes sense when people apply it to another part of the body, but when they deploy it to the feet, there's this kind of dogma around, no, just keep your knee in the one position. Yeah. But where you see joints, you should see movement, because if our anatomy, our DNA, our biology wanted us to just have no movement at that foot, then we'd have a femur there as a foot. We'd have a plank of wood that just allowed sagittal plane forward and back motion. But it doesn't. It has a midfoot with loads of joints there because we need variability. Every time we take a step, presuming it's not on the same concrete floor every single step of the day, then our foot would be going through range of motion. So this is why you see a lot of yogis with very, very messed up feet. But that typically tends to be ignored because there's sexier ranges of motion, which is like, look at my toe touch, or look at my forward fold, look at all my poses. But they're kind of defined poses where, like, here's the things you should be able to do in these poses. But as soon as I take you outside of that, what does that look like then? That's kind of real world movement, not man-made positions that have been just someone has made up at some stage.
I think that when it comes to yoga poses, it's very, because when you're a teacher, you want people to come to your classes, and therefore it's much easier to entice someone with an impressive posture than it is with, this is how you use your foot. And one word or one phrase I heard when I was studying biomechanics was function follows form. So you mentioned about all the joints in the foot. If you understand the basic anatomy of any part of the body, that will give you a clue as to what it can do and maybe what it should be doing. Mm-hmm. Although the thing is, what you do, right? And I've looked at your stuff, is in the rehab world, you are given a certain set of exercises to do. One follows the other, but they don't necessarily flow into each other. Mm-hmm. Whereas in a yoga class, part of it is to give people an experience for an hour, and the word flow is used a lot. This is so that people can come in, and essentially it's a breathing class with movement added in, and the movement is to remind you to breathe. Mm-hmm. But what I found sometimes is that flow, with all that great flow that looks really sexy, really cool, and like almost dance-like, that you're sometimes not addressing the smaller technical things. Mm-hmm. And when people have come after work, they're knackered from a day, they've been listening to their boss all day, and they come into a class and you start talking about the arches of the foot, mm-hmm. you can see you're losing people. Mm-hmm. So it's as a yoga teacher, it's a real difficult thing to thread in, and to know when to do it, who to do it to, and how to do it, not being too technical. On the other parts of yoga, and now we are generalizing here because every teacher has their own style. What about hamstrings? And this is a leading question slightly, but what about...
I know.
But yeah, my path is basically feet, hamstrings, and wrists. That's what I find, particularly hamstrings and wrists, get the most bother in yoga. So what have you seen in those areas?
Yeah. On the hammies, I think they're typically overstretched. I think the hamstrings are... I don't like to place more importance on some muscles than others, because everything is as important really, and everything has its place. But when you overstretch hamstrings, you run into a lot of trouble. And people will typically look at an anterior tilt of the pelvis as maybe not a so desirable thing. So my pelvis really starts to spill forward. And then I get like my back erectors are on all of the time, which they're kind of going to be, because when the bones go into the position, the muscles are going to be just in a leveraged position to be on or not so on. So when we stretch hamstrings, overstretch hamstrings, typically the pelvis will start to spill forward like that, because the hamstrings attach up there. And they have no choice but to lengthen. And so it becomes a very interesting conversation, because yoga people love breathing. They understand the value of breathing, and it's so important to get people breathing well. It's probably the number one stop for people, regardless of what issues you have in your life. If you breathe a bit better, you're probably going to feel a bit better. And if you move a bit crappy, if you start to breathe a bit better, you're probably going to feel a bit better. So it's a very important thing. But when we stretch hamstrings, our breathing gets worse, if we understand the biomechanics of breathing. Because I stretch my hamstrings, I overstretch my hamstrings, my pelvis starts to spill forward into an anterior tilt, which is just, if people don't understand it, it's literally the front of the pelvis just goes forward and down. And then the pelvis and the rib cage have a direct relationship, where people can even try this. If you feel like you're sitting on your chair, you can lift your ribs up towards the sky, then exactly what should happen at least is my pelvis spills forward. So I lift my ribs up, or I lift my chest up at the front, and my pelvis spills forward at the front. I let my chest drop, and my pelvis will tuck under a little bit. So these have a relationship with each other. So if I stretch my hamstrings, my pelvis goes forward, my ribs come up in the air. Now all the breath starts to go forward into my belly. And then this is, again, some yoga people might cue belly breathing all of the time, but we do have a back of a rib cage too, and sides of a rib cage, and chest walls that need to be able to expand. We don't have lungs in our belly, and I do understand that the diaphragm should be able to descend and pump up and down, but everything shouldn't move forward in my body. I need to have 360 degree expansion in my rib cage. And when I stretch hamstrings, I will compress the life out of the back of the rib cage. And if people understand relaxation, I hope I'm not going too fast now, but you're sitting beside me and you look quite relaxed. And what way will someone sit when they're relaxed? They'll be a little bit more slouched, which is a good thing. If I'm sitting on the television and I'm watching the funniest show ever, and I'm eating a pizza and I'm having the time of my life, I'm not going to be sitting up bolt upright. I'm going to be a little bit more relaxed and a bit chilled. Whereas if you see someone who's very anxious, they'll probably be bolt upright and they'll look like someone shoved a stick up their ass. So when I stretch hamstrings, I close the back of my rib cage, and now I can't relax. So we have to be careful with that. And I'll that's trying to break that down as simply as possible, really. But you have to understand the biomechanics of breathing and the biomechanics of some of the things you're doing. And it might lead you to saying, maybe I shouldn't stretch hamstrings so much. It might.
Yeah. Other one is wrists. So I used to teach a lot of handstand workshops. And I really love doing handstands, but the difficulty in this place I live now is we've had a baby, and the baby has gone into they now have Eve has a baby room, where it used to be my yoga room, or our yoga room, should I say. So now I only have the loft, and the loft isn't tall enough for me to do a handstand.
You're going to have to learn a tuck handstand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my life is tough, you can see. But I know it's a minor problem to have. But the thing is, I don't practice handstands that much anymore.
Yeah.
And I really want to. But a big thing that used to come up a lot was
Wrists. Yeah.
wrists. Firstly, and maybe I shouldn't be asking this question, but risk to award in terms of benefits of a handstand, what would you say?
I think I used to do a lot of hamstrings. I was going to say handstands. I really enjoyed it, and I think any of my. I never want to take away movement from people. I think handstands are great. It can be really fun. It can be a way of getting people out of their comfort zone and loading the body in a different way. So definitely. The wrist is just a tricky one. There's no easy answer for it because it's just loading an area that we don't tend to load so much. And particularly in wrist extension, which if you think about it, you're on your phone, your laptop, everything in your life is pretty much wrist flexion, and the fingers are being pushed into that flexion. So if you look at basic like range of motion, a lot of people don't even have access to, and I check mine here. I don't have 90 degrees at my wrist here.
Well, active extension.
Yeah, active extension. I'm a little bit less. Now, that doesn't mean I can't do a handstand. Like, it will adapt by me doing that, but it is putting a lot of load on the areas. So I think it's a great thing that we can start to train that. The only thing I would say on the wrists is we just need to take it slow because they can get beaten up quite quickly.
And it's so hard once you've injured your wrist when you're doing yoga for it to heal, because you're always on your hands, down dog, plank, simple movements. The other thing is, what you touched on there is active, I would say like active stretching as opposed to passive stretching. This is another thing that's come up as well. Like people, and I have done it myself, just get so used to teaching passive stretching because it's so much easier to say, look, grab that strap, put it around your foot and pull the foot towards you. Then saying, try to lift your foot without using anything. No hands, no floor, no strap. But I feel like it's our responsibility as teachers to accept there's going to be jarring moments where people are going to think, well, I don't enjoy doing this because it's difficult and I'd rather do the thing that makes me feel good. But ultimately it's we should be saying you should do this because of these reasons. And the thing about a handstand is it's almost like if your hamstrings are more open, if you can compress your hips more, your hip flexors more, if you can have strong forearms and can do active extension with your wrist, you can then do a handstand. So you're giving them a kind of a reward at the end. That's what that is the you could say the beautiful path. That sounds a bit sappy. Beautiful path, man. About going to, I was gonna say journeying. Stop, Kev. About going towards a handstand. So have I missed anything else about other injuries that you've seen coming from yoga to what you've seen? So feet. Hamstrings, wrists. Actually, can I ask you about ankles? Because we've kind of skipped out on that a bit. You mentioned about the toe going forward of the knee. The knee going forward of the ankle. Jesus. Knee going forward of the ankle, right? Now, if you go to, I believe it's New Delhi airport. I was in India a couple of years ago. They have a sculpture of someone doing sun salutations, and one of the poses is called Angionasana, which is a low lunge, and the guy's knee is way past his toes, way past. But I think what's happened is poses like Warrior 2, which the front hip is in external rotation. In order for the knee to go forward, it tends to there's not enough external rotation. It doesn't track the big toe, as it were. So I think people have heard people say, like in Warrior 2, don't bring your knee past your ankle. And then they have applied that to more more like forward back lunges. So my point is to defend the kind of, I suppose, yoga and yoga community. I think knee past the ankle, we know it is good, it is helpful, but it's just, you tend to err on the side of caution. Because when you've got 30 people in front of you, just finished a day of work, and you don't know mixed level. It's not like you where you're basically prescribing. It's very specific to someone who's done specific movements. You're teaching to the, what you said, Gen Pub.
Me?
What did you know? You said that phrase you used. Gen Pop. That means general population. That's a new term I used today. But when you're teaching to the Gen Pop, you tend to err on the side of caution, because part of you is worried that someone's going to come back to you and say, I hurt this and therefore you're responsible.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, but I've taught classes too. Like I used to have a stretching and mobility class in the gymnastics club in Watford, and some classes we had 20 or 30 people there, and I would rather like if you're moving your body, there's this chance of injury or a chance of whatever. So that's like we can't really avoid that. If you're walking across the road, something might happen. But also, how are we helping people move through the world better? Like, because if we are, our knee is going to go past our toe on every single step we ever take. If you walk up the stairs or down the stairs, it's going to happen. And I would say we're increasing the likelihood of someone getting injured by stopping their knee going past their toe. And actually, there's nothing wrong with that, but particularly if we're telling people your knee shouldn't go past your toe, that's a big issue, because now we're putting your body shouldn't do this. And that's, especially in my world, like we would see this all the time. Someone comes to me and they've had issues with their knee for 10 years, and it's because someone told them 10 years ago your knee shouldn't move past your ankle. Or your knee shouldn't move towards your big toe, because that's when your foot will pronate and flatten a little bit. I'm like, that's the exact movement your body has been crying out for 10 years. And we see this with back pain as well. You should hinge down to pick your pen up off the floor. You shouldn't actually let your back round to pick the pen up off the floor. Like, if your back shouldn't round, then it wouldn't round.
Why does it have vertebrae?
Exactly.
Many,
So like, it's just there's no wrong movement. Not like keeping your knee over your ankle is not a wrong thing to do. It's just we have to be careful with maybe what we're telling people might actually be wrong. And I'm not saying I'm not saying yoga teachers are doing that, but some, and in every world, like in the gym, in strength and conditioning coaches, Pilates teachers, rehab, physios, yoga teachers, we're all saying things at some point. We might not realize we're saying it, but we might be doing people a disservice or a disjustice by telling them your body should not do a certain thing. And actually, we don't know the power of our words, like especially when we're coming from a place of authority. Then people, I know this because I've done this in the past, and I've been quite anal about my movement in the past, and I'm like, my body shouldn't do this because someone told me, and I'll actually make sure I don't do that ever. And someone told me once, like, belly breathing is the way to go, and I breathe into my belly for every breath I ever do, and my movement, my body basically got destroyed because someone told me belly breathing was the way to go. And
how did you fix that?
By not trying to breathe into my belly anymore. It just doesn't make sense. We have a rib cage that needs to pump in 360 degrees. That's the biggest thing. So the knee over the toe thing, fine, but just be careful, especially if you're coming from a place of authority, what you're telling people should and shouldn't happen. Maybe it's just, you can just view your class as more of an exploration, or here's the poses that we like to do, but that doesn't mean that other things are wrong or bad.
That's a really good word, exploration, because sometimes you want to feel like you're the authority, and you, especially when you first start, you're kind of insecure. So you want to be like, I know what I'm talking about, and it's this way or the highway. And then you find yourself saying things like, do not do this, do not, just... Sometimes it's pure laziness as well, or you've just heard someone else say it. But instead, like, framing it as exploration, saying, what I tend to say is, I like to do this version, but you can also try this. And I'll often pick out someone in the class who's got a completely different body type to me, can do things that I can't do, and ask them, is it okay if I reference you in certain movements? Because I think as well, you have to... as you're teaching, it becomes you're evolving yourself, and sometimes you have to give the students more credit that they actually want to learn. I like to treat it like a 70-30 ratio. 70% of the classes we're moving, it's all stuff you're quite familiar with. 30% is new information. And actually, when people leave and they realize, for example, you can overstretch your hamstrings, they may have never thought of that. And if you show them some basic hamstring contraction, pull your heel towards come into a lunge, pull your heel towards your bum, or using your hand or strap or something, and then trying to keep it there but release your hand, for example. The look you get on people's faces
Yeah.
You know, it's that shock.
But it's worth, like, you're just showing people things that they might struggle with or their body can't do. In my experience, people love that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You know,
Because
it does humble them, but you want to humble your students as well, because people love seeing something that they might not be that good at.
Yeah.
And that's where we learn, I think. So, like, for me, a little bit of education goes a long way, because you can have the guru culture of, like, always come to me and I have all the answers for you. But really, at the end of the day, only you can feel what's happening in your body. And, like, yeah, I might be able to have words of wisdom, and I should have that, and I am the authority when it's my class. But, like, we just do have to be careful with that, I think, and try and expose stuff to people that they might need along the way. And, like, if they don't have to come to a class with me tomorrow, they can't make it, like, maybe you can do a little bit of movement at home and find your own flow, like someone just made it up 10,000 years ago. Like, you know, I don't think there is any special movements that you're going to find the answer in this one pose. It's just feel what feels right for your body and explore that, you know.
And you're giving them ideas as well, because that, as you said, that look of surprise initially, and then, like, oh, there's actually stuff here I've never explored, I've never tried before. And it can be, what I think is the most rewarding, and anyone who's listening out there is a yoga teacher and they're thinking, I've taught everything there is to taught, I've done every sequence there is, how many times can I teach a lunge the same way? Forget the big poses, like putting your leg behind your head, or, I don't know, touching your nose off your toes, that kind of thing, right? Forget all of that, even handstands. Can you teach basic movements in a simple way? And not only as a teacher will that give you loads of material, because it's endless then, if you just break down little things into small parts, but also you realize that you don't have to break your neck trying to stand on your head, whatever it is. That's why I used to teach. I used to be like, right, I'm going to get into the class and do a hand, and I'd be like, this is what we're doing today, do a pose like a handstand, forearm stand. And part of it was like, I'm showing off for a little bit, so that you pay attention. You're like, oh wow, that's cool, I'd like to be able to do that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So that, completely honest.
No, but that's a good, like, there's no problem with that either.
Yeah, and that can be fun.
Yeah.
But then but as a teacher, then what are you doing next week?
You have to learn a new skill. Yeah.
I mean, because people want to feel that they're progressing.
Yeah.
Where do you progress after a handstand?
Yeah.
So therefore, by breaking down the small things like the feet, whatever, you've got a lot more to explore.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I know you work with athletes, but you said you also work with Gen Pop. What is the most common things general population come to you with in terms of ailments?
You see a lot of back stuff. I get a lot of back stuff, a lot of hip stuff, a lot of knees, and then feet, I suppose, as well. So those are the things. Typically, you just see people who, one, can't breathe very well. I think a lot of things stem from there, and there's quite an easy way of breaking down. If I do a breathing assessment on you, which also involves, like, checking your internal and external rotation at your shoulders, your hips, your hip flexion, your shoulder flexion, all of these things, I can pretty much figure out what part of your ribcage you can't get air into, or what parts you can't compress, by looking at what part of what way your hip can't move. And so a lot of the time we're going to start with breath, but the position we put them in and the part of the ribcage we're trying to compress and the parts we're trying to then open up depends on what range of motion you're struggling with at your hips. And when I talk about range of motion, I have to be careful and say it's not the, like, so if, for instance, I'll use this that people might understand a little bit better. When you think of when some people think of a forward fold, they're thinking about the length of someone's hamstrings. When I look at a forward fold, I'm looking at the journey to there. And this is what, with the yoga poses as well, I would like maybe people to consider the journey towards them poses rather than the end pose itself. So I'm thinking about I want to see someone doing a forward fold, and I want to see, like, their chin almost dropping down to their chest. Sorry, not a forward fold, just pick up the pen off the floor. I don't want to see a hinge where your back stays dead straight, because that means you're overthinking, you're getting a lot of co-contractions around your spine, and you're not maybe comfortable enough to just relax and let your spine bend. So I want to see the first third of the movement, you should actually see rib cage depression. So the ribs kind of depressed down and back, And that's telling me, like, if you skip that entire part of your forward bend to pick a pen up off the floor, then I'm actually thinking, okay, you actually can't get air into the upper third of the rib cage at the back, because you actually can't get movement there. And then you'll see the second half, like just past that, then you should start to see the middle back round, then the lower back. And you should start to see weight kind of shifting through the feet as they come up and down. So my assessment is, some people might look at, did you touch the floor or not? And you have long or short hamstrings. That doesn't even come into my mind. It's actually, I can get someone to touch the floor in 30 seconds if I can get air into the right part of their rib cage, which gets expansion, which gets some of their back muscles to relax, and they can touch the floor. So the assessments, it's not about the total range of motion. A lot of the time it's how they got to that end position tells me so much more, because I've almost assessed your entire spine, your pelvis, your rib cage, your breathing mechanics, and your foot pressures as you went down to touch the floor. But that doesn't take me any more time than it would someone else to just look at a forward bend as well. It's just, you have to, if you understand how the journey the joints make, then this is what you'll see. So those assessments are really cool, because I can get someone on the table. And that's not just me. I don't want to sound like I'm a genius here. It's a very simple little process when you understand. But when you start to see a lack of shoulder internal rotation on the right shoulder, and you don't see it on the left shoulder, and I see that in 95 people out of 100, then you have to start to understand that the body is asymmetrical, and a lot of those people can't get air into the right side of their chest. So they can't expand the right side of their rib cage, they can't internally rotate their right shoulder. And so this wouldn't lead me to telling someone, your rotator cuff is tight, because why would 95 people out of 100's rotator cuff on the right side be tight? It's actually that they're asymmetrical. We're asymmetrical human beings, and we struggle to get air, for instance, into the right chest wall. So when we understand all these things, you start to, movement just becomes a little bit easier to look at then, and prescribe movement on top of that.
The breathing is the foundation. This is, in terms of exploring the capacity to breathe, if you say to someone, breathe, they'll say, I am breathing.
Yeah.
Otherwise I wouldn't be here. But for them to explore the capacity, they have to, what's called in yoga, is called kumbhaka, which basically means it's like breath retention. So not breathing. And people find this easier on the breath in than on the breath out. So what I try to teach them is completely empty your lungs, and then hold it in. Right, and what you'll feel is a moment of panic. But what we typically do in life is avoid panic. But obviously this has benefits to the nervous system, because you're learning how to deal with panic. But also, and you know more about this than I do, I assume that the more you breathe out and then you hold it out, the more you can breathe in. Would that be fair? Yeah. Like, to keep it really simple?
No, it is, because if you think of like your glass of water there, if that glass is full, then, or 3/4 full, then how much water can you put back in? Not very little. So like, how much fresh air can you put into lungs that are already hyperinflated? Not very much.
Hyperinflated. That's a really great word. So just to dig in to that, hyperinflated lungs. I'm imagining that this is quite common, because people are shallow breathing, they're in a state of anxiety a lot of the time, and you know, when you feel like panic, you naturally breathe in, don't you? Whereas if you get home for a long day at work, you sit down, you go, your natural instinct is to just to breathe out. So when you do that breathing technique with people, are they lying down?
It depends. They can be in any position. It depends on where you're trying to get air into or out of. So if you think about getting into if you think about getting into like a child's pose position, now, and actually tucking your elbows in, like, so that your hands are not out in front of you,
underneath your body.
Underneath your body. So what you're probably doing then is actually closing off the front of your body. So I'm stopping, like if I tuck my elbows into my chest and my my chest is almost back, I'm sitting on my heels and my chest is tucked in a lot, then I can't get air into the front of my rib cage or my belly very easily. So air always takes the path of least resistance. So it's probably going to think about going to the back of the body and the sides of the body. So if you think about if I'm lying on if I'm in a side lying position, then that's kind of squishing my rib cage together side to side, because the floor is on one side of my rib cage and gravity is kind of pushing down on the other. So air is going to probably want to go front to back a little bit more. So we will call that posterior to anterior expansion, or anterior to posterior expansion. So front to back expansion versus side to side expansion. So looking at, and you'll see different shapes in the bodies and stuff. What you'll see in a yoga person, I would say 99.9% of the time, someone who's been practicing yoga for a long time, is they have a very straight spine. Their chin is tucked, their pelvis has gone forward into an anterior tilt, and all of that air, the ribs at the front open up, and all of that air goes into the front, but the back is completely compressed. There's no chance whatsoever they can get air into the back of the rib cage. And
if you took a child's pose with your elbows tucked, that would actually open up the upper back a little bit.
Compared to and getting air into the upper back is relaxation. That's like I was saying to you earlier. It is it's expansion. It's also, if you think about center of mass, I don't want to get too complicated on it, but when we lift and put all air into the front of our body, where is the weight going to shift on your feet if you were standing up? Forward. Yeah. And when you start to shift your weight forward, what is your brain thinking? It's in a black cave. What's it thinking?
It's going into...
I'm going to fall over.
Okay, yeah.
So when I'm going to fall over, what's going to kick in? Reflexes in my body to say, because falling, if you think 10,000 years ago, if I fell in nature, like, I'm dead meat. So my brain, the two things it's interested in: one, getting air in, so it doesn't care how it gets it in, it just wants to stay alive. Two, not falling over. If it does those two things, it's probably a successful day. So the more I breathe into my belly in the front of my body, the more the weight starts to shift forward, the more my body and my brain feels like it's falling over. And if you even stand up and try and fall over, your body won't let you. A leg will come out and catch you. So these reflexes are inbuilt into our body. They're not even going up to the brain. They're short-lived reflexes that are hitting the spinal cord and back, and they're almost inbuilt into the muscles. So it goes boom, 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 like little light switches flicking on. And if you try and let yourself fall over, your back muscles will contract like hell, because they're trying to pull you back. Your calves will be on, and your toes will be gripping and pushing down into the floor. And what do you see a lot of yoga teachers with? Bunions, because all the pressure is pushing into the toes all of the time, because their weight is shifted forward on their feet all of the time.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and the more I stretch hamstrings, my butt goes up in the air, my weight goes forward. So hamstrings and belly breathing are pushing my weight forward, is contracting my back, is closing off the back of my rib cage, and is the exact opposite of relaxation. Because relaxation is feeling like I'm not falling over. This isn't a conscious reaction that you can take. It's your brain is saying you're not falling over. It doesn't matter, I'm not letting you fall over. So it's going to keep your back muscles on all of the time. So that's why all of these things, like the biomechanics of breathing, I think is the number one thing people could hopefully start to look into a little bit more, because I don't have to always breathe into my belly to get a relaxation response. And if I do, like just getting people to focus on their breathing, they're probably going to relax, right? They are, like, they're just going to just feel the air coming in and out of your nose, you're going to relax a little bit. So, you know what would be relaxing is me not needing to sit down and think about my breathing to get me to relax. It will be my air coming in and filling up all of my rib cage all of the time without me having to think about it. Now I'm relaxed all of the time, rather than needing to go and think about my breathing for 20 minutes. Not that that's a bad thing. I think everyone should do that every day. But that air filling up 360 degrees in and out, rib cage starting to pump, that's what gets the pelvic floor to pump, the diaphragm to start to move, my internal organs get a massage, all of these things. So good breathing mechanics is what sets us up for everything. So I know that's a bit of a rant.
No, it's good. It's because if I could take anything away from yoga, and I'd advise that people the same, is learn how to breathe.
Yeah.
Even if it's very basic. If you go up to someone in the street and you say to them, breathe in, they'll typically pull their belly in, as opposed to like they'll pull everything in as opposed to like relax or sorry, let the belly just come out. And you can do the best poses ever. You can do a great physical class, but if you're not breathing, it doesn't. You're limiting your ability to affect change. I want to just ask you about FRC, right? And I've started to implement CARS, controlled articular rotations, into my classes quite a lot. I do some very basic FRC stuff, but is this like do you see? Is it like? What's I'm going to put this? Is it worth the hype? As in, is it? Because I'm looking to get qualified in it. It's a grand. It's a grand to do it. Yeah. It's a grand to do a day, I think, an afternoon or something.
Yeah.
Is it like all it's cracked up to be?
I don't think so. It's
Save myself a grand.
Yeah, it's not. It's a very reductionist model of looking at movement. I sound like I'm really grumpy here. Like I think everything is great. Like that's
yoga's rubbish.
I think everything is great. Like just anything that encourages people to move more is brilliant. I just love people to maybe have an understanding of what they're training and movement a little bit better. But that doesn't mean, like, I just think all of these things are valuable. I just don't want anything to be put maybe on a pedestal higher than something else, because then we start to make a guru out of one teacher or one type of training, when we know if you look down the street, you'll see people moving in all different ways, and what works for you might not work for me. Pilates is good for someone, yoga is good for someone. It's really, I think, what people enjoy the most. Like, just what do you enjoy? Go for a hike, go play tennis, go play golf, go do yoga, have a combination of things. So I think everything works. I think the FRC model is definitely very good, but it is quite reductionist in terms of just move your joint, that one shoulder, through its range of motion every day. Like, absolutely brilliant. Move it through its range of motion every day. But what they don't take into account is the position of the bones are starting in the first place. So what you'll see is a lot of people lack, especially you see FRC, they get attracted to FRC. Oh, I can't internally rotate my hip. Okay. So they keep trying to do cars and pails and rails and trying to get more internal rotation at their hip. What they don't realize is that their hip, their femur, is already in internal rotation, because their pelvis has spilled forward a lot of the time, and that my femur naturally moves into internal rotation there. So you can check someone on the bed and say, okay, you have 0 internal rotation, but it's because you're already in internal rotation at your hip. It would be like me and you saying, we're going to lie on this side of the room, and then I say, can you go to that side of the room? And you say, well, I'm already here, I can't go there, there's nowhere left for me to go. So you would want to think about getting the joints into some kind of more neutral position. And I'm careful with that neutral word, because it's not that neutral is perfect. It's just a nice place to begin my journey from. If I was in a room, I could stand in the middle of the room, and that means I can go and explore all corners of the room. But if my joint is already in a position, like if I say put your arm overhead, and then I say put your arm overhead, you're like, oh, but where am I supposed to go? I have to go the other way first. So just in the FRC stuff, they don't take into account the position that the joints are beginning with. So I like to clean up the rib cage and the pelvis first, because a lot of our compensations begin from the center of the body. So the ribs and the pelvis get pushed into a certain position, and they get a little bit stuck there, and that biases our shoulders and our hips into certain positions. So just like I said before, like you will see, you can test this on people, anyone can go and test this on people. People cannot internally rotate their right shoulder. They have no chance most of the time. They can do the left, they can't do the right. So FRC might say keep doing internal rotation on the right shoulder, but it's because of the position of the rib cage that we fall into that they can't get that in the first place. So now I keep stretching into that position. I'm actually trying to stretch through ligaments that are saying you shouldn't be going here based on the position of your rib cage. There's actually a bony block that's stopping me from going there. So if we can have an understanding of that first, then we might clean up the position of the rib cage, the position of the pelvis first, and then I can move my joints, because I'm starting from a more neutral position in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so it's good. It's everything is good,
yeah.
But it's just the sequencing of things and just having an understanding of where of why I would use one tool versus when I might stretch a hamstring versus when I might not, when I might do my cars versus when I might want to clean up the rib cage first, when I might cue someone to belly breathe versus, oh, actually this person just really needs expansion in the back of the rib cage. So it's just having an understanding of these things, and then you don't have any like this is good or this is bad. It's more like this person needs a little bit more of this person needs a little bit more of that. But they are all tools in the toolbox, and you can pull them out when you need.
Yeah, I think as again, like teaching to the general population, my priority is, because I started yoga to try and get out of pain, to reduce pain in my body. Therefore, I teach that way as well. So I realized the people in my classes are sitting probably too much. If they are exercising, it may be walking, running, maybe cycling. So what movements can I do to counter that, and also to complement, make them more able to do what they enjoy doing? That's what I've reduced it down to, because if you can do that, you realize then that there isn't one right way, but instead you can borrow. And I have found the FRC stuff good. I like the principle behind it, but ultimately you're trying to teach balance. And the thing about, say, like a yoga practice, what I'll say to students is, this is great, you're doing all this pushing and stuff, but try to incorporate a little bit of pulling, even just some hanging for your shoulders. Whether they do that or not, I'm not sure, but because no one really likes
at least you said it.
So talk to me then, before you go, about what's next then. The upper body stuff, is that your next project?
We've a few things in the pipeline. So the lower body basics program was quite successful. So we've had nearly 6,000 people do it from 70 countries, I think now. So that's been pretty cool, and that's just like, I don't want to sound like I'm promoting it. It's just when COVID hit, I had like a 3-month waiting list to see clients, and because we were already doing a lot of online stuff beforehand, and we were kind of just lucky, we were in a position to kind of already be there, whereas other people were probably trying to figure it out a little bit how I do it. So we released the program. It's been huge, to be honest. People like coaches, therapists, Olympic athletes, professional athletes that are on $10 million a year have been doing it. But they've been buying it for 55 quid, so I'm not too happy with that. And
how about a tip, lads?
The England rugby team, England soccer team have been using it, but like one person bought it and gave it to all of them, so that's not great. So there needs to be we've done a second version of that, and then we've done a core one, and they're just it's not like this is the way you need to do things. Again, I'm trying to be like very clear on that. It's just, here's some things that I like my clients to be able to do to get their hamstrings to be stronger, co-contractions around the knee joint, pelvic movement in 3 planes of motion, breathing drills that can expand different parts of the rib cage and compress different parts of the rib cage. And it's just, if I had an Olympic athlete, if I had Johnny down the street there who just wanted to walk a bit better, these are the drills I start them with, and there's progressions and regressions. So that's been very good for us, and we've hired a couple of physios as well to do online one-on-one sessions then as well. But thinking about starting a platform now at the moment where we start to teach some live classes. So have some pre-recorded classes that are available, and then teach some live classes maybe on Zoom 2 or 3 days a week. So that and just generic upper body program are the 2 that are going to come. And
what about teaching teachers? Are you doing more of that?
Yeah, I'm doing a good bit of mentoring, more kind of one-on-one stuff. Oh, yeah. But that's where like I am getting a lot of that at the moment, where people are inquiring about that, and I've been saying that for about 12 months that I would put together. I did when COVID hit first. We did a webinar. Which was basically, here's how I assess online clients and kind of some of the movements I would use to help treat them. And we got 300 physios from around the world. So that was the first webinar we did, and then we did a knee pain one after that. So that was our first kind of dipping a toe into the more education space. And people have been kind of crying out for more, but I just want to be careful with that, because I just want to make sure it's delivered very well. Especially when you start to teach coaches they're already, like, every day people are tagging me using some of the stuff in the programs with their clients, which is really, really cool to see. But when I come up with a full 8, 10, 12 week course or whatever it is, I just want to make sure it's bang on, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I've learned, even just like looking at your stuff online, I'm doing the foam roller between the thighs because I'm trying to improve my running, you know.
The hip shift stuff, yeah.
The hip shift stuff, exactly. And I think whether you're a teacher or you're a practitioner, or hopefully you're both, you know, if you're teaching, you should be practicing. When you take simple things like that, loads of the hamstring stuff, especially like, you know, the one you do where you extend one leg out, you put the foot on a foam roller and you lift up, right? I do that one in class, but we don't have any equipment, so I just have the heel down, and but simple stuff like that, it makes you realize, wow, I can't do a real simple thing. This could be kind of fun to get good at this, and I think when you, the next day, the day after, when you feel the differences in your body, and you're running a bit better, you're moving a bit better, you can play your kids better, that's enough.
Yeah, and that's buy-in. Like we were talking earlier about with our clients, like buy-in, the most buy-in comes from someone feeling better, and they're like, holy shit, this stuff works, like I'm going to not miss a class. And like enjoyment, yes, massively, but we can enjoy working hard too, and we can enjoy exposing our body to all these different things, but buy-in ultimately, from my experience, is getting results with people, and they tell all their friends. And if you can help someone feel a bit stronger, a little bit more flexible, but just expose them to different things, like they eat it up. So, and you can feel really good about yourself, and it gives you so many different, it opens your own eyes to like, like I've been teaching yoga for 10 years, and then I put my foot on a foam roller in this way and try and do that bridge, and I literally can't hold it for 3 seconds. And it just, when you feel that, like you can't look back, because you say, I've been missing something here.
Exactly.
And you just can't look back. And when you try and, like, I've been stretching my hamstrings, I've been doing all this external rotation stuff, but when I try and get my hips to shift like that, they don't shift. So it's like, I have been missing things here. And it's not that the other stuff is bad, it's just I just want to plug the gaps and expose my body to different things, and your body will thank you. It loves that. It loves a bit of variability.
Yeah, absolutely. David, that was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I have to make sure that people, I'm not grumpy as I sound. I love yoga. I do love yoga.
But question everything.
Question things, that's all. And look, simple things, simple little tweaks, simple little cues. They make a big difference, like, you know.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
That's great. This episode was brought to you by Move, Meditate, Sleep, an all-in-one platform to help you move more freely, meditate more easily, and sleep more soundly, with new content added every week. If you'd like to try a free 7-day trial, click the link in the pinned comment below.